It's Tony Lynch, and I am a men's grief coach, and I am so excited to have a soulful self-care conversation today.
John, good to see you again. Had to walk out to let you back in. Stuck in a storm of a relationship. Lost my fire. Oh, and I forgot about me for way too long. But it's rolled on. Now there ain't no shade around here.
Pearl Chiarenza with Women Successful Living, and also the founder of this amazing fun show, Soulful Self-Care Conversations. And we've been having fun with our new title, having some amazing guests come on. And we've got some really cool things upcoming because we actually have people like you that are sitting and listening and or watching us on YouTube. So like and subscribe below if you're not yet on YouTube. We are actually going to have everyday people like yourself that want to come in and have some mini coaching sessions. So if that's you and you want to be like, hey, I would love to have a few minutes of coaching with Pearl, just like and subscribe below and we will reach out to you. My team will set it all up for you. It's fun, it's vulnerable, but it's all about you during those sessions. And today we're going to have an amazing conversation. If you are somebody who has lost somebody in your life, if you've lost a child, I just want to give you heads up. This might be a little triggering for you, but we're here to support you as two parents who are in that same path with you and how we navigate the life that we have now are living the before and after of a loss. And so today I get to introduce my friend who I've met. We've been on some summits together. We've been really getting to know each other over the past few months. And that's Tony. Tony Lynch is the founder of the nonprofit Memories of Us and Men's Grief Support, where it's a global grief network. Host of the podcast Grief Let's Talk About It, which I had fun being on that podcast. Host of the Global Grief Conference program. He's also a writer and editor-in-chief of a Grief Talk magazine and author of The Adventures of Our Grief Guy. So as you can see, we're going to talk about grief today. So if you know somebody that is walking through this journey of grief, I want you to grab them, call them, tell them to listen to this with you or watch this with you. Get a pen and paper and just create yourself a safe space because we care about you and we want to support you. And so, Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Pearl. I've been looking forward to this.
I know we've tried to make this happen a couple of times. I lost Wi-Fi. We had hurricane, we had storms, all this crazy stuff. So here we are. But that's also
Yeah.
part of the journey we're going to talk about today. Like, things happen, things come in waves, and how we still navigate and still show up in our life is something I definitely want to touch base with you today. But before we get into all the information that we want to share and our conversation today, there's one thing that I love to do to open up the show, Tony, and that is to go back and talk to our little inner child. I always like to ask that question of, when we were growing up, we're like, I want to be this when I grow up. I want to be the president of the United States. I want to own my own business. I want to be a mom. I want to be a dad. We have all these thoughts in our head that we want to be when we grow up and become these adults that we are today. And so I always like to find out from my guests, like, when you were little, that little Tony, like what did you want to be when you grew up and how does it correlate to today? Now, I'm going to throw the caveat in there. I'm going to give mine as well. But both of us will agree as we have this talk today is we never thought in our wildest dreams as adults we'd be walking the journey that we're walking, and that is of two parents who have lost a child. However, if we talk to that little girl and that little boy in us, we know that, God's got us. For me, I know that no matter what's there, I'm going to be able to walk through it and have the support that I need. But for me as a little girl, I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to teach elementary school. I wanted to make a difference in children's lives. And so in high school, I was in a program where in my senior year of high school, we would go and depending on what you wanted to be, you could go and work in that field. So I got to go and work at an elementary school the last day, the last half of my day. And it was so much fun because the teacher I had, I can't remember her name. I keep trying to find it, but I cannot find it in any of my paperwork. But because I talk about this all the time on the show, is I got to go and help be her assistant. And she let me teach some of the class stuff with the little kids. And it was so much fun. The unfortunate part for me is I had two parents that did not have the knowledge or the resources to help me get to that next step with college. And really where I went to school, and those that went to school with me, I apologize for saying this, but where I went to school, if you weren't of a certain caliber, you didn't get that guidance that you needed to help you understand that, yeah, you could do student loans and things like that. So I didn't go become a teacher per se in elementary school, But with how it correlates to what I do today is here I am, I'm this life coach. I get to empower women to step into who they are, to understand that our journeys are important and that we have to put ourselves first so that we can show up for the things that we want to. So I always joke with my clients, they'll ask me, what did I want to do? And, I talk about how I used to do mortgages and stuff. But I joke and I say, well, I thought I was going to teach you when you were younger, but I just get you now in your adult age. So that's why
Yeah.
that's for me. I kind of just put a little twist on it. So for you, Tony, what were your aspirations to be, and what kind of career did you want to be as that little Tony?
I always wanted to be a comic book illustrator. Yeah, I used to love watching like Saturday morning cartoons before we got kicked out the house, especially during the summertime, before we had to go outside and go play with our friends. I love Saturday morning cartoons. I love watching cartoons when we got out of school, like He-Man and Spider-Man, G.I. Joe, and all of those, right? Thundercats, I love doing it. I used to always, when I was a kid, I learned how to draw the snorkels and the Smurfs and stuff like that. And I have a younger sister. And my sister used to love these things, but it was always sad when it went off because she was like, "Oh, well, I don't get to see it. I'll have to wait till tomorrow." So I used to draw little comic books for her and things like that. That way she could always go back and she can read it. And look on her face her smile would brighten up her room. And I taught myself how to draw. Ever since I was a kid, like it just made sense to me. And I was like, oh, I want to do this. I could do this. So I started drawing my own comic books, making my own characters and things like that. And I used to love doing all of that stuff. Um, and when I got older, so there was a moment in time, probably about 20, 30 years, where it just wasn't in me anymore. I used to fight all the time, busted up my hands, and so I put down a pen and a pencil, and I picked up fighting. And over a period of time, I lost the feeling in my hand because I did a lot of damage to my nerves. But things have a strange way of coming back full circle, right? Because now, in the work that I do, I can be creative. And what I mean by that, like I just started my own graphic novel called The Adventures of Grief Guy. I get to design my own magazine. I get to write my own programs. I can, hosting a conference. I can the imagine the possibilities are endless, right? I can add in things. I could do well, you was part of the conference this year. So all of the different things that we were able to do with the infomercials and the music and the games that we added in, like so it. Although I'm not physically drawing out things, the creativity is still there, right? And what I find was that through that, I'm able to connect with people on such a level that I never even thought so. So everything just kind of came back around full circle, and I was able to use some of the most tragic things in my life and turn it into something beautiful and fun and educational for people, right? And I built a career around that.
I love that I could see that. I never knew that about you. We had never talked about that, about draw the cartoons and stuff. And I could just like the picture you were building was like, I could just see your sister be like, oh, they're not on anymore. And then here you are creating this beautiful thing for her to be that connected to that. And then,
Hmm.
then when you said kicked out of the house, I was chuckling inside because I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember those days. You got kicked out. Don't come back till it gets dusk. Now it's
Yep.
like we can't get our kids outside. They want to be on the screens and everything. I was just we have 14 kids at the time you and I are recording this. We have 14 kids that are here from France, and I put them in families around Tampa Bay area where I live. And so I was speaking with one of my friends this morning. She's like, "Yeah, my son set up the computer and the games for him and everything." I'm like going, "This is too funny! Like coming all the way to France from France and still want to be in gaming and stuff like that." It's like,
Yeah.
and I thought, when you said kicked out, I remember that you got kicked out. I lived in North Carolina. You got kicked out, and we lived in a community neighborhood, and so you hung out with your friends. We played in the
Mhm.
woods, and we just had fun with Mother Nature and stuff like that. So it's like,
Yeah.
as you said that, but you're right. I mean, and what you said, like how I love what you touched too is like we talk about how your hands, like your with what you did with the boxing and things and how that changed your hands and the feeling. But
Mhm.
but again, like what this show is about is talking about how we can navigate something different for our self-care, for our what we want to do for ourselves. So you thought differently, like you used your mind. Like, how can I get creative using my mind? I might not be able to fully use my hands the way I want to, but I can use my mind to be creative in that way. And I think
Mhm.
that is so amazing because we forget our mind is powerful. And you and I were going to talk about that today too. But our mind is so powerful in what it tells us and how we let it navigate our life. We can go down that rabbit hole of like, oh, I can't fully do it with my hands, so therefore I'm not going to do nothing at all. But I mean, you're right.
Right.
Like you're doing these things in your work. You're doing magazines. You're writing. You're doing these events. Creativity, the character, all of that is so important for the listener, for you guys listening to understand that just because one thing comes in your way and you think I can't do that. Can't is a four-letter word, I believe. It's probably spelled with more letters than that, but it's a four-letter word for me because it's like it switched the light bulb and say, how can I do it? Instead of saying I can't, turn that negative into that
Mhm.
positive. In what way can I use my creative juices? In what way can I be a teacher in the world? And I think
Right.
that's, for both of you and I, we've watched it for our before and we're using even more for our after when we had these major life changes in our life. And, so we're gonna get right into it. You and I both have lost a child,
Yeah.
and it's a club that I wouldn't want my worst enemy to be in with me, because it's not a club that you ever imagine. And, when you and I are recording this, it's right after not even a week after the devastation in Texas where they lost all those children at the camp and everything. And my heart just poured out for those parents and, the siblings and to watch some of them on the news and to see how, it's so heartbreaking. And it's that thing that like we said, we were little, we never thought that I'm going to have to, you know, live this life of without a child that I bring into this world. And so that's how you and I met, is through your grief and what you were posting. And you've been an inspiration, I know, for me because of things that you do. It just reaffirms what I tell myself. Because when you and I talked and I was on your show, I shared how Matt was born of our heart. He was adopted. We adopted when he was a month old. We have our other son, Nate, who came through, infertility treatment. So we struggled for 10 years to have a family. So to get this family and then all of a sudden God takes one of them away, it's like, whoa, this is not what I wanted in my life. But
Yeah.
to be able to go back and like 2 days before Matt passed for me, I remember he was here in the garage and him and Chuck, my husband, were working on something for the business. And he was like, Mom, throw me a bottle of water. And I remember throwing the water. Now, every time I touch a water, this memory comes back. And he's like, wow, you could finally throw something, but not on top of also figure out who the heck you are. Because it took me the longest time because we tried for 10 years to have kids. So here I was, I'm thinking, I got to do everything for them because this is part of my dream. And I didn't realize until he became a senior in high school how much of a people pleaser I had become. Like wearing all the titles, doing everything for everybody else. And about his beginning of his senior year of high school, as he was rising into high school, senior year, I remember I took this course because I was leading more into my journey of becoming a life coach. I was mostly health coaching, but because my clients would come to me and they're like, you get such great thought about my mind and why I'm choosing the things I'm choosing to put in my mouth. I need you to talk to my friend. They don't need to lose weight, but they need to fix their life. And I started doing these free teas with everybody. And then so I led down this world of like, okay, this life coaching door is sort of in my face. I need to open the door and go and see what it leads me. And so in doing so, I took a course, Identity and Destiny, and I had to figure out during that 6 weeks, we had to come up with our I am statement. And I realized I was such a people pleaser that it was not allowing me to show up for me. And I really didn't know who I was. So as I went through the journey of this lessons I learned from this course, I started learning to put myself first and started setting boundaries around that. And my boys were seeing it, especially Matthew. And for him to say that 2 days before he passed, when he passed, you and I both can agree, and I'm sure there's some that are listening to us right now that are probably that person who's sitting in their bed thinking that life has ended because I've lost this child and my world's done. And so every day you sit in the bed and you cry and you're just like there's nothing else to live for. I go back to those words that Matthew said to me 2 days before he passed. I'm like, I need to continue living what he saw me become because he
Yeah.
would not want me to sit in my bed. And if you're listening to us, your child, your loved one would not want you to sit in your bed and just not and let life pass you by Because think about, like, I thought about, how did he live? Yes, Matt had struggles. Matt struggled with alcohol. He had mental health issues from being adopted and his birth mom not sharing information. And it doesn't mean that he didn't still live his life. He still found a way to live his life. And so for me, I had to make that choice that I'm going to still live my life. It's going to be different. And how can I take this loss and how can I use it in, taking my coaching experience and coach myself a little bit, get help for myself, listen and meet people like you in my world. And then also, how can I take this lesson and pay it forward? And that's how I've chose to, and we'll talk more about that in a second, but that's how I've chose to move with this grief, to learn to live with this grief, because it truly is. It's the day before I was sitting at the beach watching the sunset. The next day I've got news that my son has passed, and I learn about it on the news. I don't even have a knock at the door. So it was very tragic how everything happened. And so I make the choice every morning. It's hard, but it's a choice to say, instead of saying I can't get out of bed, I am going to get out of bed and give it my best shot for today. And so, Tony, I would love for you to share a little bit about your journey and, how we unfortunately became part of this club, if you will.
Yeah. So my son had a very interesting history ever since he was a kid. So he was born December 18th, 2007. He was my Christmas baby. And I tell you what, having him changed my world because before then it was always just me, right? And I really didn't remember a time where it wasn't just me. I've always maneuvered around in the world, wandering from place to place, not by choice, but just by life. Life dealt me a hand that I couldn't believe. And so the sequence of events led me to being homeless, becoming an alcoholic, being in the game for over 24 years, watching friends die and things like that. So now I'm at this place in life where life is starting to look pretty good. I finally got me a roof over top of my head. And I'm in my 30s and now I'm about to be a father and, all of these different things. So, just through a lot of grace, I was able to stop drinking, became a father. But my son's mother was a narcissist. And so shortly after that, she began to try to control me. Well, she didn't try, she did a pretty good job of it. And when I started the proverbial fight back, like, no, you don't get to control me. Well, she went even lower. She took my son away from me for 2.5 years and I couldn't see him. And I literally lived right down the street. But during that course of time, she stalked me. She used to curse me out in the middle of stores. She used to follow me up and down the streets. She got me evicted out of two places. She got me fired from 4 jobs. She had 3 of my vehicles repossessed. I mean, you name it. She was doing it, right? And so it's real hard for me to maneuver around, but something inside of me said, no, don't walk away from him, right? And so after 2.5 years, he even convinced CPS, Child Protective Services, that I was the bad guy. So not only is she coming after me, but now she's convinced these people to come after me too. And I was getting manhandled. I was getting beat up around and everything else. So eventually, she gets caught. Someone calls because she was being abusive to the children. Now, mind you, this is what I didn't see. So I learned all of this after the fact. So they ended up having to take the kids away from her, realized that I wasn't a bad guy, and lo and behold, life would have it. I get into a new place after 2.5 years. I get custody of my son. Now I have to figure out what I'm going to do as being a man. Like I don't know how to do this because I've never had a positive role model. So I got into some men's groups, just to surround myself with people who only to realize that those guys was just as messed up as me. And I was like, well, I'm going to have to do something different. And so I went back to basics. I went back to, I'm not a very religious individual, but I do believe in God. And so I went back to that. And I said, look, I don't know how to be a man. I really don't have any good role models. So maybe you can teach me. Right. And I began to change my whole life. And then I said, I still have a problem. I don't know how to be a father. Now, mind you, all of this damage has been done to my son, but here I am with him. And I'm trying my best, right? Well, at least I thought I was trying my best. My son was the one who turned everything around. and begin to help me see life through his eyes, to be his father. And I embraced it, and it was the best thing ever. And so for the next for the next 4 or 5 years, it was always just me and him, always school, after school, play dates, you name it. It was always just me and him. Every weekend we'd go out and do father son day, like usually Saturdays, go to the movie, go to his favorite place, Chuck E. Cheese, that way he could play with his friends. And then, Sunday morning, after church, we go see his friends and he had play dates with them. And it was just this beautiful thing. I love watching that kid grow up, right? Taught me so much and I had a blast. October 31st of 2015, he suffered a major overdose because his pharmacist mixed his medication wrong. And so talk about the mistreatment from the doctors, et cetera, right? Like no one wants to watch their kid go through something like that, ever, right? But then to get mistreated by the hospital, people that's supposed to be helping you, is a totally different ball game because it's like, what do? Right? And through a lot of grace, my son pulled out of that. 9 months later, my son passed away from unknown causes at the age of 8 years old. And so having to watch my son pass away, it was like, wow, man, like I was so angry with the world. I was like, I didn't do anything. I can see if I was game banging the things that I used to do, and like I deserve the karma that comes back with that. But this time, I'm like, I didn't do anything. And at that, then it was a sequence of events because during that course of time, I lost my dad and my younger brother. And then 2 years after watching my son pass away, I watched my mother pass away. And so that's how I ended up here because shortly after that, you talk about the grieving process, especially when you don't understand it and you used to fighting, right? You used to being a survivor. I went back into survival mode. I said, I'm not going to get whooped by this. Well, Pearl, this thing whooped me. It whooped me pretty good too because I ended up losing everything. I had a personal training company at the time. I lost that through some really bad mistakes. I ended up leaving Colorado. I went to South Dakota only to have to come back 3 months later because the girl that I was with turned out to be a racist. So I was like, I got to go back to Colorado. Came back, bounced around on people's couches for a bit. And then finally I just got tired of that because life was not, it was not letting up on me. Everything I did, and I was even working and people couldn't understand it. I just couldn't seem to get it right. I just, everything, anything and everything that could happen did happen. And eventually I just got tired. I was like, I got nothing else to lose. I'm already homeless, right? I don't have anything. Like, it's not like I have any family. I got my little sister, but I hadn't talked to my little sister in probably about 10 years or so. So I figured to myself, I think the world would be better off without me. So I began to plan out my suicide. And the night that I went to go take to do to do is how I ended up here. Somehow, some way, this conversation came about, and I began to pay attention to it. I began to ask questions, and I became curious about what was going on with me. And I realized that it was this thing called grief. And I was going, and I went, I got nothing else to lose. I'm curious about this. Let me go over here and check this out, you know? And it took me down this path that was just this beautiful thing. And I fell in love with it. And I wanted to know more about it. And it became my first love. It became my mentor. It became my guiding light. It became my strength and it gave me purpose. And all the doors started opening up. There were some doors that closed, and then a lot more doors opened up. And you go through the whole transitional thing. You go into the rooms, you extract, but then you come back out because you got more you have to do. And so that's what led me along this path. And after I went to find support, and I realized there was nothing out there for men. So me being the person that I am, I went, I wonder if I can provoke, provide a space for men like myself to be able to come and be supported. And, and most importantly, I wanted to learn from these people. That's the reason why I did it in the first place. It wasn't to do anything big or anything like that. I just wanted to have a space where I can be around other men. Just so I can learn how did you navigate this? Because I know I'm not the only one. And so that's where Memories of Us came from. And it's funny, because it when I first had this idea, I said men like me. Then I looked it up, and there was something out there like that, and I was like, well, the grieving men, and all of these different things. And then it dawned on me. I was like, hold on, what is the one thing that we as men have in common? We don't carry around pictures of our loved ones who have passed. Why? We keep it up here. Oh, okay. Why do we do that? Because we can keep it safe. That means that if you don't know, you can't take it and hurt me. So that's where Memories of Us came from. And I was going, okay. And so I began the hard work. I began to follow the path. And this is 2019, and then COVID hit. And now we have to do everything virtually, which forced me to go into the social media world and do Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and all the TikTokies and all the Snappy Chappies and the WhatsApp apps and stuff like that. And I was like, these are all free tools. I can build my company. And people's like, oh man, the people up there. I was like, I'm not going to focus on what other people are doing. We have the opportunity to reach millions of people through the click of a button from your phone. Okay, let me do that. Then I started learning about Canva and all of these other things and Pinterest, and I started going in, I started doing that, and it just set me along this path of hard work, of healing, of developing deep empathy, right? Of addressing my own issues, not just health issues, but I'm talking about the mental issues, the emotional issues that came along with it, um the 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 dealing with the suicidal ideation, and breaking past the fear of being homeless because I was already homeless anyway. So it wasn't like I could lose anything, you know. And so I devised a plan. I said, you know what? I'm going to work nights so I can do this during the daytime. That way, I'm not scrambling to try to find a place to sleep at night. I can just work and I can do this. And like I said, COVID happened, so everything's shut down. And lo and behold, some people was like, "Hey, Tony, would you still looking for office space?" And that's where the plan began to play itself out. I was like, yeah. So I go get this office space during COVID, and I meet some other people, and I tell them, y'all come over. I got conference space. You don't have to do anything. I'll take care of everything for you. Help them build up their nonprofits. And we began to do in-person support groups during COVID. So we had mental health, we had suicide prevention, we had recovery, I mean, we had a lot of, I was bringing in some people, and it was this beautiful thing. And talking about doors opening and closing, you know, during that course of time, those people that I helped stabbed me in the back, talked bad about me, dragged me through the mud. I didn't get mad. I was like, okay, cool. It is what it is. But then I got kicked out of my office space and had to do full virtual. And during that course of time, I said, you know what? If I'm going to go full virtual, I wonder what else I can do. So I started my very first podcast, Memories of Us, because I always wanted to have conversations with people. I was always curious about how did other people deal with um, deal with their grief, deal with their loss. And I started that, and I started a production company. And still more doors slamming in my face. And I was just going, okay, I'm just gonna do me. And I began to meet more people, really good people. And in 2022, I said, you know what? I'm going to start a conference. I talked to my guys. I said, look, I think I want to do a conference. I think I know enough people around the world right now where I think we can pull this off. And so that's where the idea of the Global Grief Conference came in. And it became, I said, I don't know why, but I want to do a 72-hour event, live stream event. I want to invite all of these people to come in with a simple concept. I want you to come in and do what you do. I don't need you to come in and educate people on what other people do. I want you to educate people on what you do. And I thought to myself, like, this is a great way to get people out there, right? And because it was never about me. And I wanted to invite podcasters and educators, and I wanted people to have fun. So we did it. So our first one kicked off in April of 2022. We did our second one in again in April 2024 or 2023. We skipped 2024. I had to take care of some stuff. And then in 2025, we did our third annual one, which led me into becoming an author, right? And I didn't think about that. I was like, wow, I just became an international bestseller, and then I got another book out, and then I met some more people. We did more stuff. And then from there, I went, you know what? I think I want to start a magazine, right? So I started a magazine, Grief Talk Magazine, and I started writing programs for people because I felt that the programs that they had out there were so outdated that, it just wasn't serving a purpose. And I went, if you can use this, please use it. And I've managed to travel the world and do guest speaking and help other people start their organizations. And I didn't know how, but I did, right?
Yeah.
And it was this beautiful thing.
So, oh, my hold on one second. My Alexa. So one of the things you talked about that is important, I think, for the listeners to understand is men with grief,
Mhm.
because we as women, um, we for whatever reason we show our emotions on our sleeves. That's just what it
Mhm.
is. I have a funny story about that, but I'll share that another time. But men don't. And I remember when Matt passed, him and Chuck own this business together, and they installed signs for the realtors. And I remember that Chuck came home one day because Matt would always do the installs, and then I Chuck Chuck would do the business stuff at home, and then he had to go out and do all the installs. And I remember he came home one day, and I was like, "So how you doing?" He was like, "Life." And I was like, "Life." And I had to think like life. And then I looked at him, I go, "Oh, you're missing Matt." And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, at that point, I was like, okay, I have to like tune into that love language that he's now his new love language that he's now when he's grieving, to understand what that is. And Matt, when we're recording this, Matt just had his birthday on this past Monday, would have been his 28th birthday. And so we always get together with his friends always on that day to celebrate him. We get together by his graveside. They tell funny stories. And I have to tell you, Tony, every year there's a new funny story I didn't know about. I think it's hilarious. I learned something new about my son. Like I knew he had a snake in my house, but I did not know it was a python. I learned that this past Monday. So he knew how much I didn't like snakes, right? But but it was hilarious. But when you talk about men and grief, because one of the things what I heard you say, I always write down while I have my guest on it. One of the things I wrote down a couple of things is like your grief actually taught you how to love yourself again in some ways as well, right? Like your
Mm,
grief, for me, it taught you how to like save your life again. As something as heavy, especially like you lost your son and all these other losses right behind it. For me, what I heard you also say was like grief saved your life in another way that you could never imagine. And for me too, like I feel that's a little bit as well. I feel like had I not been doing the work that I was already doing on myself about overcoming people pleasing that led me to becoming the coach that I am today, I could quite possibly be that person that is just sitting around letting life pass by me. And so I had to find the purpose. And so what you did is, like you said, I mean, thank God he intervened and said, "No, Tony, you're not going to go do what you think you're going to do. You're going to come over here. You're going to find this community. You're going to find a community of people that you need and they need you, and you're going to create this thing that men need because it's missing. And men, they don't, like you said, they put it all in their head because they don't feel like, some men think it's lesser of them to show their emotions. They don't show because it's also how we were grow up. Men don't cry, boys don't cry. And I was like, tell my kids, you want to cry it out. Let's cry it out together, because I don't want you to hold it in. And it's interesting because what you're doing, I've actually shared with a friend of mine who I unfortunately had to meet her. Her and I are really good friends, and we say the same thing we said at the beginning of the show. We wish we never met because we met because she sat with me when we were planning our son's funeral. But she has this grief group, and it's for parents. But the only parent that shows up are women because for whatever reason, men are not comfortable. And I've shared with your organization. I'm like, we need to start sharing this out to the men, the wives that are coming, so that at least they feel like they have another outlet. And maybe being with women just doesn't suit them. They need something different, you know. And I think for me, that's one of the things I want the listener to take away is there's no book. There literally is no book that says this is how you grieve. There's no book at all. And so if somebody tells you that, tell them get lost. Because you have, you know, somebody described it a couple weeks ago when we were talking about it. We have what we call these waves, how we ride the waves, how do we surf the waves. But then we also have the tornadoes that come up. We have those tornadoes that just feel like everything's flying around me and I don't know how to stop the tornado. I don't know how to, you know, get rid of the tornado. And that is when you do definitely turn towards help because that's when you can go down that rabbit hole and it can lead to all other kinds of things in your grief journey. But, you know, one of the things that I always like to, especially when I'm coaching my clients who are going through grief, and you and I've talked about this before too, is like there's no book for grief. You have to ride the waves, but you don't have to do it alone. And that if anybody, you know, here I am, this month will be 3 months that we lost, 3 years, sorry, that we lost Matthew. If anybody tells me I need to stop grieving, I need to get over it, anything like that, that's going to be the person that's going to put me in jail because I'm probably going to end up punching them or something and be like, there's no, and if you're listening to this and you've not walked that path, you don't ever tell somebody you should get over it or they're in a better place because what's better than having them here, you know? And it's also like things in the world right now. My friend Lisa, I learned this from her. People will complain about, you know, this or that. And Lisa actually has an amputated leg and she's got something wrong with her other foot too. So she walks with like help. And she'll say, you know, I thought the worst thing in my life was my legs, but really the worst thing in my life, there's nothing worse than losing a child. So you can complain to me about the weather or whatever, that's fine, you know. But you know, I bring it circle back to men. Men don't have these conversations amongst themselves. Like I have to pull it out of my husband sometimes because he, you know, I have to look at him across the room. I'm like, okay, he's having a moment, and just open up the conversation. Like, do you have something you want to talk about? What's on your mind? I see something circling in your mind. Like, find another way of like have that conversation with them. But I see you want to say something, Tony.
Yeah, yeah, because you said something. You said a couple of things that I want to touch on. It's not that men are uncomfortable talking around women. It's that we don't know how to articulate what's going on when
Yes.
we're around anyone, right? And
Yeah.
so I have a phrase that I use. When men grieve, it's like a foreign love language that no one speaks. So, say for instance, I could be around other men and we can have a conversation about what's going on. And what you will hear will sound like somebody talking about sports or, you know, or something like that, right? It's the language that we use. You know, here's something that goes over people's heads. Anger is a secondary language to men when we're hurting. Because when we're children, we're taught not to express ourselves. We're taught to man up. So what we do now that we know that these things make us look weak, how can I mask the pain or express the pain and still maintain my masculinity? So this is why we go off and we start fights with people or we start arguments with individuals, right? And it's a way for me to be able to get what I need to get off my chest, but in the same time, at the same sense, it's going to make you mad because you don't understand what I'm doing. And so you're going to look at that and go, I didn't do nothing to you at this. And yeah, it happens all the time. And we often go, you don't understand because you don't. Right? So that's the gap in the communication right there. But once you understand that, you can go, let it out.
Yeah.
There was there was something, there was a comic book, Fantastic Four, and the thing, Johnny Storm had just passed, it had just was just killed. And Thor and Hulk decided to go see the thing. Because you got to remember, the thing is this big, huge, he's strong and things like that, right? So Thor and Hulk goes there. And Hulk just goes limp. And the thing pummels him. Boom, 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 boom. Hulk's not fighting back. He does the same thing to Thor, right? Afterwards, after all of this is going on, you see him over there and they hug him. And the thing is crying. And it goes right above people's heads. It's because they understood what he needed. They understood the language that was being used, right? It does. Look, you need somebody, you need to express this grief. And right now, we're the strongest ones that you could pummel on without hurting. I sacrificed that for you. Men do that all across the world, right? And so if we can educate each other on what that language looks like, how to hold space with the men in your life, the do's and don'ts, not the rush things, and all of those wonderful things, avenues that come along with that, it will help people, men and women alike, begin to come together in the deepest connection that you can ever have. We can begin the healing process. We can begin to be more supportive of each other in our own individual spaces,
Yeah.
and not take things personally when things are being said.
Yes, I agree.
So the education has to be there.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah,
yeah,
I totally agree with you because that's one of the things like over the last 3 years we've learned is like, okay, this is how we feel. Like, this is we've learned that about each other, so we've been able to navigate. Because I asked Chuck, like, do you want to go with me? Because I really I don't need that. I just need you to be open so you and I can speak and and be there. So we've created this. It's a whole different language now, around grief and understanding when it happens and all of that. And so I think I love that we're talking about this. You and I could go on for hours about this subject because
I know.
there's so many lessons in this, and I feel like this is a series, but I love that, if there's anything anybody walks away with this is I want them to know, first of all, you're never alone in this. Like, don't, even though the world feels like you're by yourself. I mean, literally July 4th weekend, I went to go meet somebody for an appointment I had, and I literally drove by an accident that literally was just like my son's how he passed. And all I could think was that poor parents, like that feeling, at that point, I was like, those parents have to join this club. And so we just want, Tony and I both, and I feel, you can speak on this too, Tony. Is we want you, if you're listening to us, if you know somebody that's lost somebody, whether it's a child. I mean, the child is one, for me, it's, I've lost my mother-in-law who I love dearly, my father-in-law who I love dearly, my grandparents and stuff like that. But losing that child, especially like for trying for so long to come down that path, it's like, it was the hardest loss I can ever imagine. And I don't ever want to imagine a loss like that again. But to know that we still have to live life, it's just different and it's still can be impactful. And things happen in our lives. So whether it's grief, like, but there's things that happen in our lives, and I talk about this all the time, which leads me to saying we all have a story. We all have a lesson that we can pay forward. And for Tony and I, our lesson is grief, and this is how we want to pay it forward. For some of you, it may be that you've gone through a divorce, and that's something you want to pay forward, or you've had homelessness. Don't ever keep your story to yourself, because Tony and I met each other because of this journey, and I've learned so much in following and being part of Tony's world that I knew that this is part of what I'm supposed to be doing. This is a continuation of where I have to grow and continue and also still live. I mean, next month, Chuck and I are taking a vacation in August. Like when this is out, I will actually be in Greece, Tony, when this gets released on a cruise ship, and we will be on an 11-day cruise. We've not done anything like that since we had our kids. And to think about, we're doing something like this, but it just goes to show for both of us and also for Matt watching now and anybody listening, we still have to live our life. We still have to find joy in our life. And him and I still need to be connected. 40 years of marriage, we need to keep that connection. And we can't let an emotion divide us apart. We need to let that emotion bring us together and support one another in that emotion. And that's what I want to, make sure everybody understands today as they're listening to us or watching us today. Tony, our time is like this is so deep. Time has flown by. We're like, oh my gosh,
I
it's 8 o'clock.
know.
So I would love for you to like give some closing remarks based on that, and then also, will you let everybody know how they can reach you, and reach out to you, and what you have upcoming too?
Yeah, most definitely. Well, you can reach me on Facebook as Tony Lynch, or if you're a man, I have a group in there, the members of us, men's grief support group. If you're a practitioner, you're looking for a place to connect with other practitioners, the Global Grief Network, also on Facebook. You can find me on IG, Men's Grief Support. You can find me on LinkedIn as Tony Lynch. Let's see. We're getting prepared for next year's conference. You can check out my podcast on YouTube, Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You can you can go to the website, www.mensgriefsupport.org. You can check out the magazines and stuff. I'll be putting the links up there. You can check out the Adventures of Grief Guy, which is going to be a nice little series for people to come and be able to follow the adventures of this guy. Um, let's see. Oh yeah, I do guest speaking, so I have some guest speaking coming up and things like that, which I'll have the dates and the places that I'll be going. You come there, check me out. And yeah, if I can tell people something out there today, I would give something so simple, but yet most people struggle to do. When you're going through your process of loss and grief, learn to have some grace with yourself because there's going to be things that you don't know, and it's okay because there's no blueprint for it. But also surround yourself with people who will speak life and love over top of you, and people who have the strength to walk with you, right? Because not everybody's going to be suitable to walk with you. So, and that's going to be part of it. And it's not personal. It's not personal, but surround yourself with good people. And don't be afraid to ask for help.
That's so powerful. It's yeah, surround yourself with good people and don't be afraid to ask for help. Those are great way to for us to segue and to close this session. And that's for anything in your life, surround yourself with good people. Never be afraid to ask for help in anything you have going on in your life. And we hope you, it's a heavy subject, but we hope you got some grace out of it. We hope you got some guidance to know that you're not alone, that grief is not a journey to walk by yourself. It's definitely something that is people are out there like Tony and myself. We'll put everything in the show notes that Tony shared about his conferences, his books, and especially for the men that are listening. And if you know somebody that's a man that is walking this grief, play this episode for them. Share this episode out to them. We would love for them to meet Tony and learn more about what he does because there's a space for men to grieve, and we want to make that part of our mission here at Women Successful Living and at our Soulful Self-Care Conversation show. So with that said, I did forewarn Tony that we have these amazing cards. So I'm going to shuffle the cards, Tony. You're going to tell me when to stop, and we're going to answer the card. Here we go.
Stop.
All right. So your card says, "How am I?" Oh, this is such a good one for you. How am I expanding my influence? Think we talked a lot about that today, but how are you expanding your influence?
Um, Podcasting. I meet some amazing people along the way, and I make those connections, and it opens up the doors for collaborations. It opens up the door for deeper networking. Um, so yeah, podcasting, that's how I'm expanding everything, social media.
And you're all over social media. I think it's so much fun. I think we both ended up on a summit. Neither one of us knew we were going to be on together. And I think we were bookends too. I think I went like right after you. It was like, oh my gosh, we're
Yeah,
right after each other. That was a fun summit. So I just want to thank you, Tony, for coming on and for sharing your journey and being an inspiration for me and also for all those that are listening. Please go and follow Tony and reach out to him. In the meantime, while you're here watching and listening us, like and subscribe below. Reach out to us if you are one of those that is looking for some coaching or is like, I just want to talk to somebody for 15, 20 minutes. Just reach out to me at wsliving.com. Again, it's easy, wsliving.com, as some people will call it. But anyways, I would love to chat with you and help you understand that you deserve what you want in your life and go after your goals. And with that said, I want to leave you with this. You are an oyster. You come into this world. You've got this shell that you have to open up inside and really find out inside. And when you do, you're going to find your inner Shiro or your inner Pearl de Grace. So have an amazing day. And thank you again for being part of our show. Thank you so much for listening to this very heavy episode we just did with Tony Lynch. But I just want to remind you that, as we said in the episode, grief is not something you have to do on your own. You have support. You have us here at Women Successful Living and here on the show at our Soulful Self-Care Conversations. But I think what I really got from Tony is that there's different things in our life that can help heal us and define us. And there are different stages that we go in our life. And I know it sounded probably odd to hear me say that grief saved him or grief helped him navigate this journey of where he was going in his life. But Tony's an example of taking something that is so heavy that happens to us and turning it into a purpose, living with purpose and on purpose. So I hope that you were able to get some of that out of the show today and the episode, and I hope that you share it. But in the meantime, like and share with your friends and family. And again, thank you so much for listening.
Why'd it take so long to